Good morning, Didi.
Morning, Didi. How are you, mate?
Morning, Laura. Morning, guys.
Morning.
Hey, that's Jamie O'Hara, by the way.
You can't see me.
You can't see him on Zoom. Didi, where do you stand with this result? There's a lot of things to talk about, aren't there? How do you feel? Well, let's do the penalty incident originally, or the penalty that wasn't, or the penalty that was, rather, with Jesus. How did you feel about that one?
Well, I think it was harsh. It's a harsh decision. It's obviously one when the referee gives it. He touches him. Jesus is probably first to the ball. Thiago is behind him. I don't think it should be overturned, but I think it's a harsh decision.
Yeah, that's quite I kind of agree with you, Didi. There's a couple of things in that game where if it had gone the other way, I wouldn't have felt overwhelming anger. Do you know what I mean? So I almost, as an Arsenal fan, I was like, thank you very much for that one. And we move on. What did you think of the incident? Because we've had a discussion about this in the studio all morning. Gabriel's handball, that wasn't a handball. What did you think of that?
Yeah, well, I think it probably should have been given. Then again, is it enough to overturn it? I think we should stick with the referee's decision unless it's a clear and obvious mistake. And the referee obviously saw it was a handball, didn't deem it to be a penalty. And I think in both decisions, the on-field decision should stand because you could argue either way. But obviously in yesterday's incidents, they were both in Arsenal's favour, but I don't think it would have changed the result.
I think you're spot on, actually, with that assessment of both penalties, Didi. I was wanting to ask you, in general, though, I know Liverpool's results have been of concern. They certainly don't look the same side that we've become accustomed to. But particularly, Didi, in defence, I mean, I'm losing 3 goals, Brighton, 3 goals yesterday. They seem to be, if not all over they do look actually all over the place at certain times.
Yes, they do, and it's obviously a big concern. And the team was always very good attacking, and since Van Dijk signed, they've probably been the best defensively. But Van Dijk probably made more mistakes this season than they did the last 3 or 4 years. And I just feel in years gone by, when there was a mistake or somebody's made a mistake, Van Dijk was there to rectify it. Now he's making mistakes himself, and then you look at the second goal, it's a minute to half time, and Liverpool actually played quite well in the first half. Yeah. Maybe also down to the fact that Arsenal got that early goal and they didn't do an awful lot for the game. But to concede that goal, Thiago's missing out, and then Alexander-Arnold, Henderson, both going to the same player, it's just very naive. And this is not something the top teams do. And to concede when you've been really on top in the first half, you got the equaliser. Maybe there's a time for the manager to say, or for the team to say, we leave Van Dijk or we leave Matip back. We leave one more back. If we score, great. But we certainly won't get a counter-attack and go 2-1 down into half-time. And it's very naive, and it obviously made the second half a lot harder for Liverpool.
Didi, look, we've seen Liverpool dominate and be part of winning trophies for the last 3-4 seasons. Do you think we're coming to the end of an era a little bit with this Liverpool side? Do you think they're in a transitional period now?
Well, I think as a big team, you're always in a way in transition, Jamie. But they've been at the top of their capacities for the last 3 to 4 years. What they've achieved or what they did last season was second to none. I don't think that will be achieved ever again, to be within 7 days of winning all 4 trophies. And I think psychologically it was always going to be tough this season. But if you look at them, Arsenal yesterday in the second half was everything Liverpool was 4 or 5 years ago. They were breathtaking going forward. Every time they did go forward, there was intent. You felt something's going to happen. This Liverpool team looks tired. They look pedestrian, and they just look flat. And I'm not sure where the spark's going to come from, because obviously they've won games in the past. They beat Rangers a few days ago, but they've obviously by far superior than Rangers. They've got a tough game at Ibrox now on Tuesday or Wednesday. I just don't know where the spark is going to come from. When you talk to the end of an era, I wouldn't write them off, but my imagination doesn't let me see where the spark is going to come from in the next few weeks.
Do you think in many ways, myself included, do you think we've underestimated the effect, the loss in the team of Sadio Mane?
Probably that's the icing on the cake. That's probably the final piece which makes them an average team at the moment. Klopp said this week, teams try to work him out. and they probably did work him out, but they couldn't do anything against it because they've been so good. At the moment, they're just a team. And Luis Diaz has done great. Unfortunately, came off injured yesterday. Whether he averages the numbers Mane has got over the last 4 or 5 years remains to be seen. Nunes needs time. Whether he's a striker who scores 25 goals, I'm not too sure. And then Salah signed his contract, and since he signed his contract, he's gone missing. So, then in midfield, you've got Henderson, who's a brilliant team player. Thiago, I've never been a big fan of. So, they look very one-dimensional at the moment.
Didi, in Jurgen Klopp's post-match interview, he sounded really defeated, in his kind of attitude, not just, in the scoreline. Do you think that there's ever a concern about Jurgen Klopp? Personally, I think he's got enough credit in the bank that will protect him for a long time. But in terms of the results, if they continue to be poor, what do you think would happen?
Well, Laura, the dynamics in Liverpool are no different than anywhere else. And if results are not there, obviously at some stage the manager will come under pressure. And if they were to get beat next week or not win against Manchester City, which at the moment I think is very likely, you could be 8 or 9 points of fourth place. And we know that the owners are not the biggest spenders, and we know how vital and important it is for the team to be in the Champions League because of the revenue you get. And they've got City now. Then I think they've got West Ham in the league. At some stage, I think we will have that discussion about the manager, and I'm not sure how far we're off. And he said this week he still feels he's the right man to do it. But then, I look at little things. I look at Jordan Henderson midweek against the Rangers. His numbers going up, and he's reluctantly taking his armband off and shaking his head and coming off shaking his head. And this is something we haven't seen at Liverpool for 5 years. Henderson for me is the ultimate team player. Whenever he never played, he came on, did his job. When he had to come off, he came off, shook the manager's hand, everything was good. And maybe there's little signs that, people are maybe got a few problems within the team or maybe even with the manager.
Didi, while I've got you on, I want to ask you about the Bundesliga. Great game at the weekend there, Dortmund, Munich, 2-2 draw. But again, I noticed another brilliant, I know they lost last week, but another brilliant result for Union Berlin at Stuttgart.
Yes, unbelievable. They won last night. They're top of the league still, and if you ask me why they're up there, well, they've got a very good team. You won't know too many players, Ali.
Exactly.
But they just perform as a team. They lost Aboni to Forest. They lost other players in the last few years, very, very good players. Replaced them with unknown players outside of Germany, and they perform. And Urs Fischer, the Swiss manager, is doing a brilliant job. How long they can keep going, I'm not too sure. But I think they're unbeaten now. For the last 14 or 15 games because they didn't lose the last 4 or 5 last season. Unbelievable what they do.
Didi, can I just bring you back to the game just before we let you go? Because you mentioned Jordan Henderson and signs of frustration in that team. There was an incident on the pitch with Jordan Henderson and Gabriel, and it's being investigated by the FA. Are you concerned about what that investigation might throw up? Or I understand that it's difficult to know exactly what happened, but are you concerned that they're looking into it?
Well, if something like this happens, you're always concerned. And I was surprised. I didn't know why the manager speaks to the referee speaks to the two managers yesterday afternoon. But then again, I've got 100% faith in Jordan Henderson. And I'd be very, very surprised if there was anything racially abusive said towards an Arsenal player. As I said, there's an investigation, but the way I've experienced Jordan Henderson over the last, I think, 10 or 12 years since he's at the club now. He's been a leader. He's been a prime example of what, a team player should stand for. And I'd be very surprised if something comes off it.
Thank you, Didi. Appreciate your time on talkSPORT Breakfast this morning.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Good to see you, mate. Have a good day.
Okay, mate.